Welcome. This is your boy Drew Breezy, Pastor Drew Breezy, and I'm here with
Patrice, apparently Breezy.
Pastor Patrice Ambrose.
Pastor Patrice Ambrose.
And we're here for another episode of
Just Between Us.
Just Between Us. And this is episode 4. This is a really cool episode because this episode talks about who's right and who's wrong.
Just joking. But before we get started, make sure that you like us, subscribe, and go see us on all of our platforms, whether Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and definitely here on our YouTube series, Just Between Us.
Absolutely. So, when having a discussion, my love, who's right and who's wrong? So before you can even answer on that, right?
I'm right.
All kidding aside, it's all about perspective.
Babe, you said perspective,
Yep.
and I totally agree. A lot of times we get into arguments, and I mean like couples get into arguments because everybody just wants to be right and wants to be heard. But we have to really realize that what we're dealing with is someone else's perspective on a situation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And you got to realize that we all come from different places. Like, we grew up in 2 different households. So the way that you approach a discussion, not an argument, it's a bug, baby, it's okay. Not an argument, is going to be based upon your experience, based upon the way you saw your parents deal with discussions or arguments. Some people, like myself, we tend to be more listen, not emotionally react. And other people will be a little bit more verbose in their response to a spirited discussion.
Oh, so that's what we're doing? Okay. We're not doing that.
All kidding aside, it's true though, because of the way that you're brought up, it's going to give you a different perspective. It's going to formulate the narrative of your discussion based off of what you saw and based off of your past experience.
I totally agree. And I think that a huge issue that we also have as couples with perspective is allowing ourselves to not be emotionally inclined or withdraw.
Now, there's a reason why my wife said that. When we first got married and we would get into these spirited discussions, I had a tendency to just shut it down and let her say her side. And I didn't want to fully engage in that manner because I wasn't comfortable engaging in that manner. And it wasn't until I realized that me withdrawing offended her more than the discussion that we were having. So it took a process for me to understand that, well, she's looking for a response in the moment, right? She's looking for feedback in the moment. I wasn't equipped in that moment to give her my feedback because I didn't know how to properly give it. So that's one of the reasons why I withheld. But I also saw the way that when my parents interacted when I was younger, I didn't like that interaction when they would get into these spirited discussions. You know, that's just not in my temperament. But I didn't realize it would cause an issue with us because she's expecting
To have a discussion. And what I learned is that I knew there was no right way of having a particular discussion, but I had to deal with the fact that mine wasn't the right and only way. That I learned how to also take a step back and just kind of gather my thoughts, and also prepare myself for the right opportunity to have a conversation. And I think a lot of time when you feel that you have something to say and you feel that you're right, and you may very well be right in what you're saying, but your timing is off. And that was something that I had to learn when speaking my truth, is making sure that it was in a moment, in an environment where he was able to receive. And I just want to go and say that, there is right and wrong, point blank and the period. There is right and wrong. But when you're in a relationship, you have to be mindful of not always wanting to be right, because sometimes that deters your husband, wife from wanting to have a conversation with you. Maybe they're struggling and what you have to say is right, but how you say it may not be couched in love. And so therefore, or they already feel bad in and of themselves, and you repeating your rightness all over a million times isn't really helpful. And so I want to bring up the fact that there's right and there's righteous.
So right and righteous. So we all have this need to feel right, because right means heard. that means that if you understand where I'm coming from, if you hear me, then my point is validated, that my feelings are validated. Therefore, if I'm right, I'm validated. Now, when you're talking about right versus righteousness, that's different. Because righteousness doesn't mean that you're wrong, doesn't necessarily mean that you're right either. What it means is that I'm going to understand the spirit in which you're saying it. I'm going to try to understand the heart behind it. I may not agree with it, but we're going to work through it.
Yeah. Righteousness is allowing God to be right. It's saying that I'm going to put down my right to be right and pick up what God says that I need to do in this moment. So maybe you don't need in the moment to prove you're right. Maybe in the moment you need grace. Maybe in the moment you need to be still. Maybe in the moment you need to be encouraging to the other person. You know, and so when you think about the difference between right and righteous, you're not fighting to be the person that gets to be like, see, I told you, I'm right. Yeah, you're fighting to make sure that what you two come to as an agreement, as an understanding, will strengthen your relationship, encourage your relationship, and ultimately build upon the love that you should have within your relationship.
Absolutely. And even beyond that, when you think about what love is in the context of that, love is something that it doesn't matter who's right or wrong. It's about getting on the same page. I want to just reference the scripture. 1 Corinthians 1:3, verse 4. And it says, love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant. Now think about that when you're having a disagreement or a spirited discussion with your mate. It says love is patient and kind. Patient meaning that I'm going to listen to what you're saying. I may not agree with what you're saying, but I'm going to let you have your say.
Yeah.
I'm going to be willing enough to hear you.
Yeah. And willing enough to let you grow. You know, sometimes we may be right in what we're saying, but not allowing other people to get to the place that we're talking about or the place that we feel. Like where Drew is in certain things and where I am in certain things, we're growing at different spaces in different ways. I may be excelling at this, he may be excelling at that. I'm still learning this, he's still learning that. And so we have to allow each other and be patient with each other as our partner is growing, as our mate is growing and succeeding. I love what did you say? Proud? Yeah. Well, boastful and proud.
Yeah, it says that it is not arrogant. It's not arrogant or rude.
So if your temperament in your conversation is arrogant, if it's rude, then you're not loving. And what kind of relationship are you trying to build where you're so busy trying to be right that you're willing not to be loving?
You're willing not to be loving.
You're willing not to be loving. Because, you know, I heard before, truth without love is just judgment. And so when someone's feeling judged, it may be because you're delivering your truth, but not in a loving way. We have to be mindful that, you know, God first and foremost is love. And we have to be mindful that we are loving even when we're having our conversations and not just trying to be right.
Can I just finish this right here?
Yeah.
Because it says, it does not insist on its own way, meaning that I don't necessarily have to be right. Or my way is not the right way, but you have to hear my heart. Then it also says, it is not irritable or resentful.
Keeps no record of wrong.
Or resentful, meaning that I'm not going to harbor it against you once this discussion is over.
And so learning how to have these conversations is so important. So if you have not gone and listened to the listening episode that we have, you need to go back and start there so that you can begin to listen and hear what each other is saying. You know, sometimes we argue over who's right, and we're really arguing over which perspective is right.
Right. Well, we're arguing over, am I being heard or not? Right? Am I being heard? And sometimes the argument is not about right. It's about, am I being heard? So there is this aspect of it about listening. But listening and hearing are two completely different things, right? Two completely different things. Especially when you're talking about people in covenant or people as a couple.